The Richmond City Council approved an increase in their meals tax, and the city manager of Norfolk has proposed raising their property taxes. Both of those cities are only slightly larger than Newport News, and like Newport News, both have high demand for services, an aging municipal infrastructure, and a school system in need of resources. Does Newport News need to consider some form of overall tax increase at this time? Start with Mr. Jenkins.
I've always been a fiscal conservative. I don't believe that tax increases are the way to go. I think that increasing meal taxes would discourage people from eating in their restaurants. They would go to other areas. I think it would place a burden on restaurant owners. I think that increasing real estate taxes increases the burden on homeowners, and particularly in Newport News, we have a lot of senior citizens that don't really have a lot of protection when it comes to their property taxes. I think the best way to produce revenue for a city is to grow that city and to grow its prosperity. I believe that if we start doing the right things and focusing on the things that will strengthen our city, the schools and bringing in business and encouraging entrepreneurship, that we will be able to grow our way out of the problems that we're having. I also think that it's vitally important that our city council set the right priorities. When I talk about adding money to the school budget, I'm talking about giving them the same sort of percentages that they had just 5 years ago. So it's not a matter of adding money, it's a matter of placing the money in the right priorities for the city's growth and development to make it a great city that will prosper and give us the tax base we need to do the things we need to do.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Penny?
I'm not in favor of raising any taxes in the city of Newport News because I think it's unnecessary. I think we need to reevaluate our budget and look at money that is misspent or that is sitting there not spent that could be moved and allocated in other directions. We have many resources in our city that we could bring back in revenue into this city. 3 main arteries that we could bring in more businesses, whether they be large businesses or small businesses. But that's the airport, that's the railroad, and that's our port. We need to run our port and get our port working and bringing in more revenue and being able to have more businesses here. All of our stuff that is ported here comes through Norfolk and then is driven across the bridge. And then it's brought over to our piers and then dispersed. So I think we need to utilize our airport, our railroad, and our ports to bring in more businesses, to bring in more revenue for our city, and not raise taxes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wallace?
I agree. I wouldn't initially want to raise taxes. I would look into other ways to reduce spending to offset any lost revenue. But I will also work with council to see where money is being allocated that's not being used efficiently and effectively, and make sure that if there's any additional money left on the table, that we appropriate it accordingly. But my first go-to wouldn't be to raise taxes. It would be to look into reducing spending to offset any lost revenue.
Thank you. Ms. Cherry?
Thank you. I definitely do not want to have taxes raised because I'm part of that equation. And so I think the city really has to look at ways that we can produce revenue and things that will strengthen the city and our economic growth. And one of the things that we can look at, which we are looking at now, is creating economic engines throughout the city to improve business development and how we can bring other businesses to the city that will help bring in employment and bring in the tax revenue that we need, but definitely not to raise taxes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Scott?
If I were going to raise a tax, it would be on cigarettes because I don't smoke and it's a health hazard. So that's the only one I would even consider if we were going to raise taxes. But we're not recommending that any or raise this fiscal year. But I think our money can be used more wisely, just investing in business to generate the tax revenue. The small businesses, like I mentioned before, that small business incubator that they're building in the Southeast community, that would be sort of like incubator where several people can share a building. If we could do more of those kinds of things, that would prevent people from having an impediment of rent. That's why a lot of businesses can't get started, because they have no place to operate business and they don't know how to operate business. I don't support any increase, because our city has an aging population that are on a fixed income, and every time we raise anything like the water fees, or some fees are unavoidable because they are maintenance fees, like when you pay for your water sources and things like that. So I just can't imagine that anybody can spread their pennies in it thinner in the city right now. We are at a bare bones budget, regardless of what it looks like from the outside. And I always tell people, when I was a journalist, I saw it from the outside. It's totally different when you get inside and you look at the real numbers. So we have to make sure we protect our citizens without creating any future liabilities.
Thank you. Mr. Bethany?
Yes, so just to echo, initially, I wouldn't look at trying to raise taxes in order to find more revenue sources unless we're trying to do a specific project or what have you. But assuming that we've done everything that we can, and we are being, being fiduciarily responsible for the funds and making sure that we've exhausted every resource within the budget, then, only then, is when I would consider raising taxes. But initially, no, you always want to be, or do the best that you can with the funds that you have available. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Reason?
Thank you. People in our city are already hurting, so many people, so as such, I do not want to increase tax. When you're thinking about budget, you really want to start with a bottom-down approach. And what that means is that you dig into the weeds of the budget. You have to go in and look at the different expenditures through the line items to determine where we can appropriate funds. Once you do that, then you'll be in a position to actually relocate or reallocate, some of our resources. In addition, if we work on improving the business here in Newport News, that will help us to generate tax revenue without putting a burden on our citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Roth?
Thank you. I'm a fiscal conservative, and in fact, I've pledged on my website, votecraigroth.com, that I would not vote to raise taxes as a councilman. One thing that I've been hearing as I've been meeting different small business people around the city is the tax on the business personal property tax. These small businesses are being taxed on their furniture, they're being taxed on their computers, on their miscellaneous office items. I think we have to take a real good look at that business personal property tax that could be hindering some small businesses from coming into the city. Also, I'd like to see about bringing the property tax down. It's at $1.22 right now. I'd like to see if we can bring that down to $1.19 just as a start to actually reduce the taxes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reed?
To kind of echo what everybody else has said, I really also, the increasing taxes at this point I don't think is really fiscally sound for the city. But what I would like to see is I'd really like to see kind of a fine-tooth look at the budget of the city, and you look through the budget, and when I look through it, it's over 500 pages. There's a lot that can be cut, I feel. I mean, we need to cut some spending here in the city, and that is from the areas of across the board. I mean, there are some agencies that are very top-heavy that we need to kind of look at kind of how that can be cut down a little bit as well. For me, though, it's also this idea of that we need to kind of increase small business opportunities in the city, allow the city to grow economically that way as well, which will help with the tax rate too. One way, I've kind of looked into this as well is, Riverview Farm Park is something that doesn't need to be touched at all, ever. That's no development at all, but it is one of those things that you could use for festivals, events. There are other ways the city can make money in the port system in the southeast portion of the community. There are other ways the city can look into making money and kind of thinking outside the box, and that's something that needs to be done a little bit more in the city in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question is